So now I just want to cover a little bit about how to properly set this up. Depending on what base you want and where you want it mounted, left and right, that's just kind of a personal preference. The standard base and the Vengeance base, they each have 3 different adjustment holes here. So the closer the sight housing is to the bow, the tighter your pin gaps will be. The further away, the bigger your gaps will be. So that's something to think about when you're setting everything up. I prefer actually to stick it out there a little bit with the 5 pins so my gaps are a little bit bigger, and that just helps, so things aren't so cluttered when I'm shooting, 40, 50, 60 yards. If you're trying to cram like 7 pins in there, then I would move it back, and that way your pins aren't going all the way from top to bottom and more centered in the sight housing. Okay, so now on to setting this up. So once you got the base figured out, then it's time to get the sight housing set where you want it. And what I like to do here is I will take, you got this fixed portion and then the portion that's attached to the base. I will set that so that the top of this is perfectly flush, and then I'll lock that down with this screw here. There's a set screw right here that twists. So that's locked. And then if I untwist it, that allows me to move it. So what I'll do is I'll set that perfectly flush. And what that does is that gives me a 0 point. So if I was ever out in the field and my sight tape fell off, something were to happen, I would always know that that's 0 and I'm back to whatever my fixed pins are set at. So what I'll do from there is I'll get my first pin, for me 30, where I want it. I want it, that upper third of the sight housing. Ideally you want all your pins kind of close to the middle as possible so that when you're anchoring, everything's centered. So I'll set it up there, and then I will move the entire sight housing up with this. So if you loosen the screw right here on the side, that'll allow the sight housing to go up and down. We'll just do it real quick. So that will allow this to slide up and down. So I will set my first pin based off of that. That's how I'll set it. So when I'm shooting low, I don't move the pin, I'll move the entire sight housing, and then that sets everything for me nice and flush at 0. And then I'll go through and set each individual pin at the different ranges. So when it comes to setting up the sight tape, so say you got 5 pins in here and it's set up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. What you want to do, and the easiest way to do this is probably pick your middle pin. So that would be your 40 pin. In this case, it's this yellow middle pin. And what I would do is I'd go down to the range, I'd take that middle pin, and you know that if it's 40, you need to crank it up. So I'd crank it up, and I'd kind of guess and eyeball where that's at, and you shoot 20 yards. So when you're shooting 20 yards, get that 40 pin so it's hitting the spot, you're wanting a nice tight 2-inch group at 20 yards. And what you're going to do there is make a mark, and I got a couple marks already on here, of where that's at. So 40, I'm using my middle pin. I'm going to make a mark right where that is hitting 20 yards. Now I'm going to take that same pin, I'm going to move the entire sight housing down, and now you want to go out to a distance that you feel comfortable shooting, that you can do consistent group. So if that's 40, if that's 50, if that's 60, if that's 70, that's totally up to you. I like to do 20 and 70. The further you get that gap, the more accurate it's going to be, but if you're shooting a 12-inch group at 70 yards, bring it back to 50 where you're shooting, a nice tight group, because that's going to give you a more accurate reading. So I would crank that down, and again, I got a mark here already, and so that was my mark. I'm middle pin shooting 60 yards, and that's where that pin hit. So now that I've got my 2 marks, I got my 20 and my 60-yard mark, I go to the sight tapes. And so for 2013, Black Gold is actually including sight tapes with every sight. And I got some here right here. So this is what the sight tape looks like. And all you got to do now that you got your 20 and 60-yard marks is go to 20 and 60 that you got on your sight tape right here. And then all you got to do is line that up. So if that 20 hash lines up with that 60 hash, which that's actually pretty dang close, all I got to do is cut out this, cut out the sight tape. And then I know I go set this back to 0 because that's my starting point. And then all I got to do is my bottom pin right now is going to be set at 60 yards. So I'll cut that sight tape off, line up the pin with the 60-yard mark, and stick the tape on there. And then you're good to go. And that actually works up and down. So if you want to take your 60 pin and make it 53, you could go up and bring the needle up to 53 and use your bottom pin, and that'll shoot for it. Again, going down, so it's set at 60. If I'm shooting 75, All I do is crank this down till it reads 75 on the tape, and then I'm good to go. So one other thing to look at in the setup of this is there's actually a lot of an adjustment in this bracket where the sliding portion mounts to the base. You got 2 screws back in here, located right here and right here, and this is actually your second axis adjustment screw. So if you loosen up the top one just a little bit and then loosen up the bottom one, this bottom hole in this bracket is actually slotted, and so that's going to allow you to pivot the sight housing left and right. And so that's how you're going to set your second axis. You got the setup in a jig, you use a level on the limbs here, get everything set, and then get your second axis, the bubble in this level set perfectly, and then tighten the screw back down. One other thing to mention here is this bracket can actually be taken off and used to adjust the windage of this. So with these Elites especially, the center shot is typically out there around 7/8 of an inch. And sometimes when it comes set up from the factory, there's not enough left adjustment in this to get the sight all the way over. So all you got to do is take these 2 screws off here. Which I'm going to do real quick. And what that's going to do is remove the entire sight housing. And so you're left with the base, and then also there's this little bracket right here, and there's 2 screws that mount the bracket to the base. And in here, there's some adjustments. So if I want to take these off, so I can take this little bracket off, and you can see that it's got 2 different set of holes in here. And so when I'm mounting this up, there's 2 different set of mounting holes in here as well. So if I had ran out all the way left, I would go to the farthest left here and then all the way on the left side of that and screw this in. If for some reason you don't have enough right, which I can't imagine that ever happening, you would be doing the opposite here. So I'm going to tighten that on. And then that's fixed there, and then I go back to the sight housing, and this actually has 3 different sets of holes as well. 3 different options so that you can adjust how this is set vertically on this. Really, it doesn't matter. You've got so much adjustment in the travel portion as well as in the sight housing itself that you don't need to worry about it. But just another feature that's in there if you ever need it. So I'm just going to line this up on the middle holes here just to keep everything nice and centered. Screw that back down. And again, if I was setting this up on a customer's bow or something, I'd be having a level and I'd get this second axis, the bubble in the sight housing so that it's reading perfectly level, and tighten those screws back down and you're good to go. So I just kind of want to summarize, the Black Gold Ascent is just a great sight, very versatile, a lot of custom options. You got 4 different bases to choose from, 3 different sight housings to choose from, and you can really set this up however you want, anywhere from single pins all the way up to 8 pins that you can cram in a flashpoint sight housing. So very versatile, great for just about anything, whether you're hunting out of a ground blind, tree stand, or coming out west and shooting 70, 80 yards. I'd highly recommend the Black Gold Ascent.